The ranking board dominated the entire eastern wall of the Galactic Federation Combat Assessment Bureau, and I had been staring at it for 317 cycles. My name is Vex, and I am a Thornback, which means I am genetically predisposed to bureaucracy, excessive note-taking, and a crippling addiction to categorizing things that probably should not be categorized. The board was my masterpiece. At the top, glowing in aggressive crimson, sat the Krillian Empire, combat effectiveness rating of 9.8 out of 10. They had 4 arms, each capable of crushing titanium, and a third eye that could calculate ballistic trajectories faster than most ship computers. Below them, the Vothron clans at 9.3. Exoskeletal plating, acidic blood, and a really terrible attitude about losing. The list continued downward through 246 species, each carefully measured, tested and ranked according to 17 different combat metrics that I had personally designed. I was very proud of this system, probably too proud. The door to my office burst open with the kind of violence that suggested someone had forgotten doors could be opened gently, and I nearly dropped my datapad into my morning stimulant beverage. A human stood in the doorway and I recognized her immediately, because humans had become something of an administrative nightmare over the past lunar cycle. Her name was Morgan Hayes according to the file that suddenly appeared on my desk 3 weeks ago. She wore the standard Federation exploratory uniform, which looked slightly too tight in the shoulders because human tailors apparently had not received the updated measurements for their species yet. Her hair was pulled back in what I had learned was called a ponytail, and she had the expression of someone who was about to make my entire day significantly more complicated. "Hey," she said, pointing at the ranking board. "Where are we?" I blinked at her, both of my eyes, independently. "It is a Thornback thing." "Excuse me?" "Humans," she said, walking directly up to the board without waiting for an invitation. "Typical. I have been looking at this thing for 20 minutes, and I cannot find us anywhere. Did you forget to add us, or are we at the bottom somewhere? Or what?" I set down my datapad very carefully. This conversation was about to require my full attention. "Miss Hayes," I began, using my most professional tone. "The ranking system is based on extensive combat trials, biological analysis, and historical warfare data. Your species has only been part of the Federation for 97 standard days. We have not yet conducted the necessary assessments." She turned to look at me, and her facial expression did something that I had learned meant she was not buying my explanation. 97 days, she repeated. "You have had 97 days to test us, and you have not gotten around to it yet? The testing process is very thorough." "Uh-huh," she said, and I did not like the way she said it. There was something dangerous in her tone, something that suggested she was about to become a much larger problem than I was prepared to handle before my second stimulant beverage. "So where would you put us?" "Hypothetically," I hesitated. This was a trap. I could smell it. Humans were shockingly good at traps for a species that had only recently figured out faster than light travel. "That would be speculation," I said carefully. "Speculate," she said. I looked at my board, then at her, then back at my board. The Thornback survival instinct which had kept my species alive through 4 continental wars and 2 ice ages was screaming at me to change the subject, but I had also not survived 200 cycles in Federation bureaucracy by backing down from direct questions. "Given your biological metrics," I said slowly, "and based on preliminary observations, I would estimate somewhere in the lower quartile, perhaps between the Fel3 communes and the Ossic collective." She looked at the board. The Fel3 were ranked at 183. The Ossic were at 191. 185-ish, she said. "Approximately. Out of 246 species. Correct." There was a very long pause. Somewhere in the building, I could hear the hum of the environmental systems. A door closed in the distance. Morgan Hayes stared at the board like it had just insulted her entire genetic line, which I suppose it technically had. Then she laughed. It was not a nice laugh. "You are kidding," she said. "The assessment is based on objective criteria," I said, which was true but probably not helpful. "Humans lack natural armor. Your sensory organs are limited to a very narrow spectrum. You have no venomous capabilities, no redundant organ systems, and your strength-to-mass ratio is significantly below galactic average. Right? She said. She was still smiling, but it was the kind of smile that made my dorsal spines want to retract. Okay, cool, so here is what we are going to do. I want to take your combat assessment test. Miss Hayes. Right now. Miss Hayes, the combat assessment requires months of preparation. Then I will take the unprepared version, she said. You do have an unprepared version, right? For emergency classifications? I did have an unprepared version. It was designed for situations where we needed to quickly assess potentially hostile species. It involved a series of increasingly difficult combat scenarios in a controlled simulation environment, and it was absolutely not meant to be used on Federation citizens who had wandered in off the street demanding to prove a point. I really do not think that is necessary. I tried. She leaned on my desk. Her eyes were very blue and very determined. Vex, she said, and I was surprised she knew my name. I like you, you seem nice, but if you do not let me take this test right now, I am going to go back to the human delegation, and I am going to tell them that the Federation has ranked us somewhere between the space hamsters and the species that communicates entirely through interpretive dance. Do you know what will happen then? I assume there will be a formal complaint. There will be a formal complaint followed by 17,000 humans showing up to take your test simultaneously, she said. And they will not be as polite as I am being. That sounded accurate. Humans were, if nothing else, enthusiastic about proving points. I made a decision that I would regret approximately 40 minutes later. Fine, I said, follow me. The combat assessment arena was located in sub-level 7, which was intentionally difficult to reach, because we did not want casual observers watching species get dismembered during testing. Morgan Hayes followed me through 3 security checkpoints without saying a word, which was somehow more unnerving than if she had been talking. The arena itself was a cylindrical room about 50 meters across, with adaptive holographic projectors that could simulate any environment and any opponent. The walls were reinforced duralloy. The floor was covered in impact-absorbing gel. There were medical stations at 4 corners because even with all the safety features, things occasionally went wrong. Standard protocol, I explained as we entered the observation booth. 3 scenarios of increasing difficulty. Survival wins. Elimination of all hostiles scores higher. Casualties to self result in point deductions. Do you understand? Crystal clear, she said, and started removing her jacket. You will need to wear the standard combat suit, I said, gesturing to the equipment locker. It provides basic protection and monitors your vital signs. She looked at the suit. It was designed to fit most humanoid body types, with adaptive plating that could adjust for different physiologies. She pulled it on over her clothes with practiced efficiency that suggested she had worn similar gear before, and I made a mental note to check her file more carefully. Ready when you are, she said. I activated the first scenario with a sense of impending disaster that I could not quite explain. The arena floor shimmered, and suddenly Morgan Hayes was standing in a simulated forest environment. The trees were dense. The light was dim. Somewhere in that forest were 3 Grishaw hunting drones, each programmed with basic predator behavior and equipped with stunning weapons that would incapacitate but not kill. Standard first-level assessment. Most species took between 8 and 12 minutes to complete it. 16 minutes was failing. Morgan Hayes lasted approximately 45 seconds before the first drone found her. I saw it coming through the trees, its sensors tracking her heat signature. She was standing very still near a large tree trunk, and I assumed she had not seen it yet. The drone moved closer. 10 meters. 5 meters. It raised its stunning appendage. She moved. I am not entirely sure what happened next, because it happened very fast, but somehow she had grabbed a fallen branch, spun around the tree, and brought the branch down on the drone's sensor cluster hard enough to crack the casing. The drone stumbled, confused, and she hit it again, and again. The 4th hit destroyed the anti-gravity stabilizer, and the drone crashed to the ground. 1 down, her voice came through the arena speakers. I stared at the screen. That was not standard procedure. That was not remotely standard procedure. The second drone appeared from her left, and she threw the branch at it like a spear. It missed, but the drone flinched, which apparently was all the opening she needed, because she was suddenly sprinting directly at it. The drone fired its stunner. She dropped into a slide that would have made a Fel-3 acrobat jealous, passed under the shot, and came up behind the drone before it could recalibrate. She grabbed it with both hands and threw it into a tree. Threw it into a tree. The impact shattered the drone's propulsion system. 2 down, she said, breathing slightly harder now. Where is number 3? The third drone had apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor, because it was retreating to a more defensible position. Morgan Hayes found it anyway. She climbed a tree, jumped from branch to branch like some kind of feral creature, and dropped onto the drone from above. They both hit the ground. There was a brief struggle. Then the drone stopped moving. Total time elapsed was 4 minutes and 18 seconds. I looked at the results screen, then I looked at the arena, then I looked at the results screen again. Vex, Morgan Hayes said, standing in the middle of the arena surrounded by 3 destroyed drones. I am ready for Scenario 2. I activated Scenario 2 with hands that were definitely not trembling. Scenario 2 was significantly harder. It involved an urban combat environment, 7 hostile combatants with ranged weapons, and civilians that needed to be protected. Most species failed this scenario. The ones that passed usually took 20 to 30 minutes, and emerged with significant injuries. Morgan Hayes completed it in 9 minutes. She used cover effectively. She used the civilians as additional obstacles for the enemy combatants. She disarmed 2 of them and used their weapons against the others. At one point she convinced a civilian to trip one of the combatants, which was technically against the rules but also technically brilliant. When the scenario ended, she had eliminated all hostiles and saved all civilians. She had also somehow found time to stack the unconscious combatants in a neat pile, which I felt was just showing off. Scenario 3, she said. I did not want to activate Scenario 3. Scenario 3 was designed for high-tier species only. It involved a zero-gravity environment, multiple enemy types including aerial and aquatic variants, environmental hazards, and a time limit. The highest recorded score was by a Krillian warrior who had spent 40 years training for combat. He had completed it in 18 minutes with moderate injuries. I looked at Morgan Hayes standing in the arena, slightly sweaty but otherwise completely fine. Miss Hayes, I said into the microphone, I think we have seen enough to... Scenario 3, she repeated. Please? The please was somehow more threatening than if she had yelled. I activated Scenario 3. What happened next would be discussed in Federation combat academies for the next decade, and I would be required to testify about it under oath 3 separate times. Morgan Hayes adapted to zero gravity in approximately 15 seconds. She used the environment to her advantage, ricocheting off walls and using debris as improvised weapons. When the aquatic variants appeared, she somehow managed to redirect the water jets they were using as propulsion to slam them into each other. The aerial variants tried to swarm her, and she created a chain reaction that took out half of them simultaneously. The entire time she was talking. Okay, fish guy, you are going into the wall, flying thing. You are next. Sorry about this. You seem nice, but you are programmed to kill me, so we are going to have a problem. Is that a laser grid? That is definitely a laser grid. Cool. I am going to use that. She completed Scenario 3 in 12 minutes and 41 seconds. 0 injuries. Perfect score. The arena powered down and Morgan Hayes floated back to the floor as gravity returned. She was breathing hard now and there was a cut above her left eye that she had apparently not noticed, but she was smiling. So, she said, looking up at the observation booth. Where do I fit? I stared at my assessment screen. The numbers did not make sense. They could not make sense. I ran the diagnostic twice to make sure the system had not malfunctioned. It had not malfunctioned, Miss Hayes, I said slowly. According to these results, your combat effectiveness rating would place you in the top 15 species in the Federation. There was a very long pause. Top 15, she said. Yes. Out of 246. Correct. She nodded slowly. like she was processing this information. Then she looked directly at the observation booth camera, and her smile got wider. "Vex," she said, "I think we need to have a longer conversation about human biology." And that was when I realized I had made a terrible mistake. Not because I had tested her, not because she had performed impossibly well, but because somewhere on Earth, there were approximately 18 billion more humans exactly like her, and none of them had been ranked yet. The ranking board was going to need some significant revisions. The emergency meeting of the Combat Assessment Bureau was called approximately 6 hours after Morgan Hayes broke every single record we had on file, and I was not looking forward to it. The conference room on level 3 was filled with representatives from 12 different species, all of whom had very strong opinions about ranking systems, and all of whom were currently staring at me like I had just announced that gravity was optional. "Impossible," said Krath, the Krillian military attaché. He had 4 arms crossed in a way that suggested he was deeply offended. "Your equipment must be malfunctioning. No species with such limited biology could achieve those results." "The equipment was tested 3 times, I said, pulling up the diagnostic reports on the central display. "Every system functioned perfectly. The scenarios ran exactly as programmed. Miss Hayes simply performed better than anticipated." "Better than a Krillian warrior," Croft said, his third eye focusing on me with uncomfortable intensity. "You are suggesting that a human, a species we discovered less than 100 days ago, has combat capabilities exceeding ours." "I am not suggesting anything," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I am reporting the test results." Beside Kreth, a Vothran commander named Shex clicked her mandibles in agitation. "How did she survive Scenario 3? The aerial variance alone should have overwhelmed her. She has no natural flight capability, no enhanced reflexes, no armor plating. She used the environment," I explained, replaying the footage on the main screen. "Watch here." She grabbed one of the aerial units, used its momentum to swing herself toward the wall, then released it directly into the path of 3 others. The collision disabled all 4 simultaneously. The room went silent as they watched Morgan Hayes systematically dismantle every challenge we had thrown at her. She moved with a combination of calculated precision and absolute chaos that I had never seen in any species. When she should have been cautious, she attacked. When she should have retreated, she advanced. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. "This is one human," said Pillix, a thornback like myself but significantly older and more decorated. "Perhaps she is an abnormality, a genetic outlier. We cannot adjust the entire ranking system based on a single individual." That was a reasonable point, and I had been clinging to it desperately for the past 6 hours. Unfortunately, Morgan Hayes had anticipated this argument. "Miss Hayes has requested that we test additional humans," I said quietly. "She has provided a list of volunteers from the human delegation, 23 names. She claims they represent a standard cross-section of human military personnel." 23, Krath repeated. "You want to run 23 more of these tests?" "I want to run 0 more of these tests," I said honestly. "But if we refuse, the human delegation will file a formal complaint stating that we are deliberately excluding them from the ranking system due to bias. And given Miss Hayes' results, that complaint will have significant weight." Shex leaned forward, her exoskeleton plates scraping against the chair. "What are you not telling us, Vex?" I hesitated. This was the part I had been dreading. During the post-assessment interview, Miss Hayes provided some context about human military history, I said. "According to her, humans have been engaged in continuous warfare for their entire recorded history. They have fought each other across every terrain type on their planet. Mountains, deserts, oceans, Arctic regions, underground tunnel systems. They have developed thousands of distinct combat techniques, weapon systems, and tactical doctrines. Many species have extensive military histories," Pillix said. "Not like this," I replied, pulling up the data Morgan had shared. "Humans have a concept they call total war. It means the complete mobilization of all society resources toward conflict. During their most recent global conflict, which occurred approximately 80 years ago by their calendar, they produced over 4 million combat vehicles, 700,000 aircraft, and engaged in battles involving millions of individual soldiers simultaneously. The room went very quiet. Millions, Krath said slowly. Their population is approximately 18 billion, I continued. Miss Hayes estimates that at any given time roughly 2% of their population has active military training. That is 360 million individuals with combat experience. I let that number sink in for a moment. The entire Krillian military, the most powerful fighting force in the Federation, numbered approximately 40 million warriors. The humans could field nearly 10 times that number, and according to Morgan Hayes, those were just the ones with formal training. There is more, I said, because apparently I hated myself. Humans do not have a natural predator on their planet. They hunted theirs to extinction approximately 12,000 years ago. Since then they have primarily fought each other. This has created an evolutionary pressure that selects for tactical thinking, endurance and adaptability rather than physical superiority. That explains nothing, Sheck said. Tactical thinking does not allow you to survive Scenario 3. No, I agreed, but Miss Hayes mentioned something else during our conversation. Humans have an unusual physiological response to stress. When threatened, their bodies release a combination of chemicals that suppress pain, increase strength, enhance reflexes, and improve cognitive function. They call it an adrenaline response. I pulled up the biological scans from Morgan Hayes' test. Notice here, during the most intense portions of Scenario 3, her heart rate increased by 40%. Blood flow to her muscles increased significantly. Her reaction time improved by nearly 30% from baseline, and according to her she was not even particularly stressed. Not stressed? Krath repeated flatly. She was fighting for her life in a zero-gravity environment against multiple hostiles. She said, and I quote, "It was fun," I said. She also mentioned that the difficulty level was approximately equivalent to what human military recruits experience during basic training. The silence that followed was profoundly uncomfortable. Pillix was the first to speak. "We need to test the others immediately." The testing began the following morning, and I had never been more stressed in my entire life. The human volunteers arrived in a group, laughing and joking with each other in a way that suggested they were about to attend a social gathering, rather than a series of potentially lethal combat assessments. Morgan Hayes was with them, apparently serving as an informal leader. "Morning, Vex," she said cheerfully. "Ready to have your entire ranking system destroyed." "Please do not say things like that," I replied. The first volunteer was a man named Jackson Torres. He was shorter than Morgan, with dark hair and a scar across his left cheek that he claimed was from a training accident involving a malfunctioning parachute. I did not ask for details because I was fairly certain they would be horrifying. Jackson Torres completed all 3 scenarios in a combined time of 32 minutes. His combat rating placed him at rank 19 in the Federation. The second volunteer, a woman named Keiko Sato, completed the scenarios in 29 minutes. Rank 16. The third volunteer, whose name was David Murphy and who claimed he was only average at combat sports, completed the scenarios in 34 minutes. Rank 23. By lunchtime, I had tested 12 humans. The lowest ranked was at position 31. The highest was at position 11. Not a single one had failed. Not a single one had required medical attention beyond basic cuts and bruises, and every single one of them had treated the experience like it was entertaining. "This is incredible," David Murphy said as he exited the arena after completing Scenario 3. "Do you guys do this for fun? Because you should totally charge admission. I would pay to do this again." I stared at him. He had just fought through a simulation designed to challenge apex predators, and he wanted to do it again for recreation. "Humans are insane," I muttered. "Thank you," he replied, apparently taking it as a compliment. By the end of the day I had tested all 23 volunteers. The results were consistent and absolutely terrifying. The average human combat rating placed them firmly in the top 20% of all Federation species. Several individuals had performed well enough to challenge the top 10. Krath appeared in my office as I was compiling the final report. He looked like he had aged several cycles in the past day. "This changes everything," he said, sitting down without being invited. "The Krillian Empire has maintained military superiority in the Federation for 200 years. Our entire political structure is based on our combat effectiveness." "I am aware," I said. "And now you are telling me that humans, a species we barely know, can match or exceed our warriors. The data suggests that, yes." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. It was a harsh sound, but genuine. "Do you know what the worst part is?" he asked. "What?" "They do not even realize how dangerous they are," he said. "I spoke with several of them during the testing. They think they are average. They apologized for not performing better. One of them, the one called Murphy, said he was worried he had embarrassed his species because he scored lower than his friends. I remembered David Murphy. He had ranked 23rd out of 246 species, and he thought he had performed poorly. "They have been fighting each other for so long that they have lost all perspective," Kraft continued. "They measure themselves against other humans, not against the galaxy. They have no idea that most species would consider them apex predators." "What do?" I asked. "We adjust the rankings," he said. "And then we make absolutely certain that humans never have a reason to use these capabilities against the Federation." The updated ranking board was installed 1 week later. The Krillian Empire remained at position 1, but only barely. Humans occupied 17 positions in the top 50, including 3 in the top 15. Morgan Hayes was ranked 7th overall, which made her one of the most combat-effective individuals in known space. The board also included a new notation system. Next to the human entries, there was a small symbol that I had designed specifically for them. It translated roughly to restricted growth species, which was bureaucratic language for, "Please do not make them angry." Morgan Hayes came by my office on the day the new board was revealed. She stood in front of it for a long time, studying the positions. "7th, she said finally. "Not bad." "Miss Hayes," I said, "I need to ask you something." "Shoot. Why did you do this? You could have simply accepted the initial ranking. Most species would have." She turned to look at me, and her expression was serious for the first time since I had met her. "Because rankings matter," she said. "They determine how people see you, how they treat you, what opportunities you get. If you had ranked humans at 185, that is how the galaxy would have seen us. Weak, irrelevant, easy to ignore or exploit. And now they know better," she said simply. "Now when humans speak, people will listen. When we propose ideas, they will be considered. When we ask for respect, we will receive it." She smiled then, and it was the same dangerous smile from our first meeting. "Plus," she added, "it was really fun watching everyone panic." After she left, I sat in my office and looked at the ranking board. Somewhere out there, on a small blue planet at the edge of Federation space, 18 billion humans were going about their lives, working, studying, raising families. Most of them had no idea that their species had just fundamentally altered the power structure of galactic politics. And the terrifying thing was, the ones we had tested were just soldiers. We had not even begun to assess human scientists, engineers, strategists, or diplomats. We had only measured their capacity for violence, and they had already scrambled the rankings. I made a note to myself to retire early, maybe find a nice quiet planet somewhere far away from Earth, somewhere that humans would never have a reason to visit. Because if there was one thing I had learned from this entire experience, it was that humans were the kind of species that would absolutely visit every planet eventually, just to see what was there. And the galaxy was definitely not ready for that.